Japan, known as the land of the rising sun, is celebrated for its cutting-edge cities, rich cultural heritage, and breathtaking natural landscapes. These attractions draw millions of tourists annually. However, this openness to outsiders is a relatively modern development in Japan's history. From the 17th to 19th centuries, Japan was isolated from the world under a policy known as sakoku. During this period, Japanese culture flourished significantly alongside rapid economic growth and societal advancements that had never been seen before. This era gifted Japan with many iconic cultural treasures that endure today. But how did Japan transform from isolation into one of today's most developed and open nations? This journey through time reveals Japan's fascinating history. The islands comprising modern-day Japan have been inhabited for nearly 40,000 years. Early settlers migrated from mainland Asia with skills like agriculture and metalworking. These skills laid the foundation for permanent settlements and eventually led to the formation of early kingdoms. By the 3rd century A.D., southern Japan had consolidated into a centralized power structure centered around the Yamato region. This system was headed by a monarch known as the emperor. Much of Japan's early history was shaped by influences from mainland Asia, including Buddhism's introduction from Korea in 552 A.D. Later, in 645 A.D., significant reforms known as the Taika reforms were implemented to reshape Japan's political landscape based on China's imperial model. Initially, Japan's imperial court lacked a fixed location and moved with each emperor until Emperor Kanmu established Kyoto as its permanent capital in 794 A.D. This marked the beginning of the Heian period, which lasted nearly 4 centuries. Over time, however, the imperial court became overly focused on internal politics and neglected governance beyond Kyoto. As a result, local noble elites gained control over lands previously under imperial rule. This decline led to powerful regional warrior clans like Taira and Minamoto rising to prominence with their samurai warriors. They challenged imperial dominance during conflicts such as the Heiji Rebellion in 1160 and later during the Genpei War, 1180 to 1185. The Minamoto clan emerged victorious under Yoritomo's leadership and established a separate military government in Kamakura. In 1292, Yoritomo secured recognition from Emperor Go-Toba with his appointment as shogun or great general. This marked an era of military rule lasting over 7 centuries called shogunate. The samurai soon faced another test when Kublai Khan's Mongol Empire sought to conquer Japan at the start of the 13th century. After receiving no response to demands for submission by 1265 A.D., Kublai Khan began planning an invasion, but ultimately failed. In 1274, Mongol forces landed on Kyushu and encountered a determined but outnumbered force of samurai. The tide turned in favor of the Japanese when a powerful typhoon, known as kamikaze or divine wind, destroyed much of the Mongol fleet. A second invasion in 1281 met with an identical outcome. Another typhoon decimated the Mongol forces. Despite their success against these invasions, Japan's defense efforts nearly depleted the shogunate's treasury. Many samurai went unpaid for their services, straining relations between them and the military government. In response to this tension, Emperor Go-Daigo launched a coup in 1333 to restore imperial power, but was overthrown just 5 years later by Ashikaga Takagi. Although shogunate authority was restored under Ashikaga leadership, actual power remained, with regional samurai clans led by daimyos who controlled land directly. These clans frequently formed alliances and plotted against each other to shift power balances within Japan, often leading to civil wars. The most violent conflict erupted in 1467 during the Onin War over succession for Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Daimyos took sides, causing feudal structures to collapse as they carved Japan into smaller independent states. This chaotic period became known as the Warring States, or Sengoku period, lasting into the 16th century, marked by significant military developments, including ninjas conducting covert operations and Buddhist warrior monks engaging on battlefields. A significant shift in warfare occurred in 1543 when a Portuguese trading ship was blown off course to Tanegashima, south of Kyushu. The 3 Portuguese traders aboard were the first Europeans to set foot in Japan and quickly established trade relations as part of their extensive Indo-Pacific network. Each year, a black ship arrived to exchange goods, primarily European muskets. These firearms were novel to Japan and quickly gained popularity among feuding daimyos seeking tactical advantages. By 1556, over 300,000 firearms were being used in ongoing civil wars. The Portuguese also introduced Christianity, which benefited their trade by giving new converts preferential access to guns and sometimes direct military support. One prominent daimyo who cooperated with the Portuguese was Oda Nobunaga. Although he did not convert to Christianity, he effectively utilized European gunpowder weapons and began unifying Japan under his rule until his assassination in 1582. He was succeeded by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who completed Nobunaga's ambitions but ruled as kanpaku rather than shogun due to his humble origins. After Hideyoshi's death in 1598, civil war erupted between daimyos loyal either to his son Hideyori or Tokugawa Ieyasu. The decisive Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 marked Tokugawa Ieyasu's victory over his rivals, ushering in a new era under the Tokugawa shogunate. This period, known as the Edo Period due to its capital in modern-day Tokyo, was pivotal in Japanese history. It brought relative peace and stability that allowed culture, arts, and economy to flourish. However, this prosperity came with strict measures to suppress social unrest and clamp down on Christianity. By 1638, Christianity was outlawed entirely. To prevent foreign influences, Tokugawa Ieyasu introduced sakoku in 1639, effectively isolating Japan from outsiders except for limited trade with China and Korea through Dutch intermediaries confined to Dejima. Throughout the 17th century, Japan prospered under successive shoguns with significant population growth and infrastructure development. Yet, by the late 1700s and early 1800s, cracks appeared as agricultural growth stalled and government responses to famines were inadequate. Meanwhile, Western ideas began filtering into Japan via Dutch scientific texts translated at Dejima. This isolation ended abruptly when Commodore Matthew Perry arrived with American warships in Edo Bay in 1853, seeking to open Japan's ports for international trade. Unable to match U.S. firepower, Japan reluctantly agreed to Commodore Perry's demands in 1853. This led to opening Japan's ports for American commercial interests and later extending this policy to other Western powers like Britain and Russia. However, this perceived capitulation angered many in southern provinces such as Choshu and Satsuma. In 1868, these provinces formed an alliance that convinced Emperor Meiji to issue a decree ending the Tokugawa shogunate. The armies of Choshu and Satsuma marched on Edo, leading to the Boshin War and ultimately toppling the shogunate. The emperor regained supreme power over Japan. By 1869, the imperial court relocated from Kyoto to Edo, now Tokyo, marking the start of the Meiji Restoration, a period where Japan embarked on modernization efforts aimed at becoming a nation-state comparable with Western powers. Under Meiji rule, infrastructure modernization was prioritized with railways, telegraph lines, universal education systems introduced. Christianity was also legalized again. The government enlisted hundreds of Western advisors across fields like mining and law to aid modernization. Military reform was significant with adoption of Western tactics. This updated army quelled rebellions like Satsuma in 1877. Additionally, Japan expanded its territory overseas by emulating colonial strategies used by Western powers at that time. After securing Hokkaido and annexing the Ryukyu Islands, Japan focused on China and Korea. The First Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895, saw Japan's forces achieve a remarkable victory over Qing China, leading to Taiwan's annexation. In 1902, Japan formed a military alliance with Britain to counter Russian expansion. The inevitable clash with Russia occurred during the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, marked by significant battles like Yalu River and Tsushima. These victories allowed Japan to assert dominance in the region by annexing Korea in 1910. Motivated by these successes, Japan joined World War I as an ally seeking new colonies in German-controlled territories. Post-war, Japan enjoyed favorable international relations through its League of Nations membership, but faced growing nationalist sentiments within its military. These ambitions led to the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, with further territorial gains on mainland China. International distrust grew as U.S. imposed sanctions aimed to curb Japanese aggression. With World War II looming in 1939, Japan aligned itself with Germany and Italy through an alliance that worsened relations with the U.S. Japan's expansion in Southeast Asia alienated Western powers like Britain, France, and the Netherlands by encroaching on their colonial territories. Under Hideki Tojo's leadership, Japan decided to preemptively strike against the U.S. to lift economic sanctions and secure recent Pacific acquisitions. This led to the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The U.S. entered World War II as an ally and began military operations against Japan, which had conquered territories including Philippines, Malaya, Hong Kong, Singapore, Burma, and Dutch East Indies. The Allies engaged in a prolonged conflict across the Pacific, with key objectives being strategic airfields for bombing raids on Japan. As fighting became costly and slow-paced for both sides, a ground invasion seemed too costly for U.S. troops. Instead, they used atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. This compelled Japan to surrender publicly announced by Emperor Hirohito after Allied forces accepted their formal surrender. Post-war occupation under General Douglas MacArthur led to disarmament of Japanese forces and democratization efforts within its government. That's a wrap. If you had a good time, smash that like button and hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what's next. See you in the next one. Peace.